What's up, everyone? It's Books and Looks TV. Today, I wanted to talk about a topic I saw online. I just want to get my 2 cents. It was basically a meme talking about Moesha being fast. I feel like a lot of people focus on the fact that Moesha dated different guys. I feel like there were some inappropriate relationships, one in particularly with her teacher. Overall, Moesha was basically Lori Harvey before she was Lori Harvey. She didn't really give a lot of explanation. She would just move on and do her. So today I'm just going to look through some of the relationships and just talk about how we frame or center Black girls and their sexuality. Started off because on Twitter someone says Moesha was a sneaky, spoiled, and overall ungrateful girl who defied her parents at every turn to meet up with hood ninjas. Y'all only think she deep because she wrote in her diary while instrumentals played. Now, I do agree with some of that, that she was a little bit spoiled and ungrateful, but I also feel like that the show didn't really go into depth about her mother passing. And another Twitter shared, her father happened to marry her principal. And so just think about your mom passing, your daddy moving on, but he's also moving on with the principal of your school, and it's maybe to her happened so quickly. I feel like she has just a little trauma to deal with when it came to that, and maybe she did seem a little bit ungrateful. I do feel like her parents had the income to provide her a certain lifestyle. They only had 2 kids, which I feel like back in the day probably wasn't a lot to take care of. That's just my general thought. I'm not saying kids are cheap, but I feel like back then with the livelihood they had, it wasn't as hard. So nonetheless, the term fast has long been used in the Black community to police and shame Black girls for behaviors that are seen as normal for their peers, like dating, expressing confidence, or simply maturing at a natural pace. Being labeled fast often implies that a girl is behaving in a way that is too mature, too flirtatious, or too sexually aware. Even when her actions are no different from those of other teenagers, this label is rooted in historical stereotypes that over-sexualize Black girls and strip them of the innocence often granted to white girls. A 2017 study by the Georgetown Law Center on Poverty and Inequality found that adults perceive Black girls as needing less nurturing, protection, and support compared to white girls of the same age. This perception leads to unfair scrutiny when Black girls engage in relationships, often branded them as fast for behaviors that are considered typical teenage experiences. And now we're going to talk more about Moesha's depiction on the television show. Moesha followed Moesha Mitchell, played by Brandy Norwood, a smart, outspoken, and ambitious teenager navigating school, friendships, and dating. Throughout the series, Moesha had multiple boyfriends and crushes, but her relationships were no more excessive than those of other TV protagonists. And I really feel like because she was a main character, it kind of highlighted her desirability and just being beautiful overall. Yet, because she was a Black girl, some viewed her as doing too much when it came to boys. Her father was depicted as often reacting strongly to her dating life in ways that reinforce respectability politics. And don't get me wrong, it's nothing wrong with wanting to protect your daughter, but maybe if he would have shown more interest in Miles, instead of just sending him up to his room, Miles wouldn't have ran away or got kidnapped. But
Just can't believe it. Miles?
He never even entered our minds.
Moesha? Baby, we owe you an apology.
It's okay, Daddy. It's all right, D. I'm just really worried about Miles.
that's another story for another day.
So do you want to go out with me or what?
Yeah.
Though Moesha had a handful of love interests, including Q, Ahaji, Hakeem, and Jeremy, her dating life was part of her coming-of-age journey. Black girls often do not get the same grace in media or in real life. And studies show that Black girls are disproportionately disciplined in schools for behaviors like being too loud or depicted as too flirtatious. And these labels can follow them into adulthood, where their romantic choices are hyperanalyzed. And I feel like this is the case with Moesha. But aside from Moesha's boyfriends, her character depiction was independent, well-spoken, and strong-willed. I love seeing Moesha, yes, write in her journal. I like seeing her focus on journalism in general, getting an internship and traveling abroad to the continent of Africa. I forgot which country, that's why I'm saying the continent of Africa. So while people can say Moesha was boy crazy, Moesha still lived a well-balanced life, in my opinion. She hung out with her friends. She supported them. Sometimes she was in their business. But her life was more than just chasing boys. It just happened that Moesha happened to be a pretty girl. Many Black parents, though, often fear their daughters being labeled as fast because of how society weaponizes sexuality against Black women. When we think about Frank Mitchell, he's often stricter on, again, the daughter. He's often stricter on Moesha compared to Miles due to a cultural desire to protect their daughters no matter how perfect or well-balanced they may be. So a lot of times Frank may have had like harsh judgments and dangers and how he perceived the world, and he just held on to his position as like the manager of Saturn. Frank's treatment of Moesha exemplifies how the heightened expectations placed on Black girls to maintain a pure image is not uncommon for Black fathers as protectors, but to impose tighter boundaries on daughters, which can be interpreted as controlling or overly harsh. And I think Moesha's dad being a bit overbearing kind of led to her being a perfectionist or just constantly staying involved in like extracurricular activities. In addition to that, Moesha did have romantic relationships. Let's go to some of the boyfriends, okay? So Ohaji was someone who was depicted as like an Afrocentric guy. He was smooth, he was suave, and he was doing too much. This was like her first boyfriend, even though it was kind of brief on the show. He was first her crush and she admired him, and it just didn't last that long, right? And then you have Q, who was basically like her main boyfriend throughout the show, kind of on and off. He ends up proposing to her, but he pretty much prioritizes his rap career and he wants to pawn an engagement ring. And even just the way he proposed to her was just weird. She had another boyfriend. I believe his name was Aaron. Aaron was a Kappa, or a song called Noop. He was a pretty boy. Yeah, he wants to get up in them drawers. And Moesha was like, baby, you can't have these. Nah, 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 not even a little bit. Nah, nah, nah. Y'all remember this song? And so that didn't happen. She had other little people coming in and out, like Matthew, the white guy, who it kind of seemed like was a trope on interracial relationships and how Black girls are stigmatized, but that didn't last long. I feel like that was more of a message than just a long-term thing, because he only showed up for like one episode. But yeah, guys like Usher came in and out. And then there was this creepy episode with the teacher. I feel like overall, I've seen, like, now to this day, people go through boyfriends like that in a year. You have to remember, this happened over her high school career. And again, Moesha wasn't sleeping with these guys. It was kind of like, I like you, cool, etc., etc. I feel like nowadays people run through people more, whether it's very intimate or not. But again, I feel like Moesha was more than what someone would say, someone who wrote in a diary while instrumentals played. And I feel like that a lot of times people just like to stereotype Black girls, and it's not really fair. But let me know what y'all think down below in the comments. And thank you so much for listening to Books and Looks TV. I'll see y'all next time.